Hello, Asham here and welcome back to some more Higurashi When They Cry, Chapter 8, Matsuribayashi. Continuing from where we left off, and apologies again for constantly getting distracted. Yeah, I'll continue. Yeah, if you don't remember what happened last time, just brief, recap there. At the end of last time, at least. The hearts of those who wanted to be shown the proper way revived his teachings. That's what the resurrection of Jesus is all about. He came back to life in the hearts of his believers. Jesus doesn't exist physically on this earth, but he exists in people's hearts. In other words, that's when Jesus became an existence superior to humans. I don't think that was the point of the Bible, but okay, even if it's after the author's death.
その偉業は必ずやよみがえる。その時私の体が朽ち果ててしまっていても、私の存在はよみがえって評価を受けるのだ。
それはおじいちゃんが神様になったということ？
So yeah, I am definitely going to guess that this is okay, of course. Because it's Mio Takano. Guessing dropping the ko. And I'm guessing this is where her obsession comes from?
そうだよ。私の研究はいつか必ず認められる。その時、おじいちゃんは神様になれるということなんだよ。
So I'm going to guess it's something along the lines of she's upset that her grandfather doesn't get the recognition that she feels he deserves, and so since they found like an actual example of where the exact research her grandfather's doing is real, she wants it. She doesn't want it shown to the world, though. It's kept under wraps. But maybe still like influencing it, playing God or something, and then trying to elevate him.
だから自分が生きているうちに評価されることに焦る必要はないのだ。その時が訪れるのが私が生きているうちなのか、そうでないのか。それは神様にもわからない。だがその日は必ず訪れる。だからその日の訪れを疑うことなく、ひたすらに努力を続けなくてはならないのだよ。
It was very sad to hear my grandfather say that his life would end one day. He wasn't ill, and he didn't only have a few years left to live. But, set next to the average lifespan, his remaining years didn't look like much. The only person left in my life was my grandfather. Aww. So I didn't even want to consider what it would be like with him gone. Grandfather must have remembered that I didn't like to talk about that subject. With a tender smile, he gently patted my head.
もちろんおじいちゃんも自分が生きているうちに研究を認めてもらいたい。だから精一杯頑張るよ。
私もおじいちゃんが世界中の人に褒めてもらえるようにいっぱいいっぱいお手伝いする。
I purposefully didn't mention the before you die part. I caught myself before I said it.
ありがとう。嬉しいぞ。
Grandfather smiled in satisfaction. His research wasn't exactly outrageous. He wasn't trying to uncover the mysteries of the universe. He was only searching for the possibility that parasites could be responsible for human behavior. Nothing more than that. Nothing outrageous. It really wasn't a wild idea. We even had some needs. Hinamizawa Village, Shishibone City, blank Prefecture. The villagers there are possessed by a powerful homesickness. When they are unable to return, they allegedly behave abnormally, as if they are cursed. There are also some bizarre rules in place in the village based on their belief system. When he was working with the military during the war, my grandfather noticed similarities between the people in Hinamizawa and assumed that some kind of existence was responsible for their odd behavior. Okay, so I think Hifumi has appeared before. Because they've mentioned someone during the war noticing Hinamizawa. Is that potentially Takano's grandfather? That's what I'm thinking. He's been researching it ever since. In the middle of the 20th century, numerous strange diseases were discovered all over Japan. Most of them were caused by infectious parasites, and people started to pay attention to this forgotten field of study. Grandfather's research was simply one of those investigations into such diseases. Therefore, he believed it would be published amongst other research and attain recognition soon. But if his research didn't bear fruit before his death, I wanted to continue it. I wanted to continue his research. Grandfather taught me. Resurrection isn't something that happens physically. It's when your life's work is appreciated. That's what he meant by resurrection. That's when you'll become a god. So when my grandfather dies, he will still be with me forever. I wouldn't have to be alone ever again. I will always be with my grandfather. Our works will gain recognition, and we will both become gods, gaining eternal peace. I will make my grandfather into a god. I will become a god. Therefore, we will be granted eternity. We will be together forever and ever. So that's her reasoning, and oh dear. What are we up to? I was looking at the key on the keychain. The key was labelled Henhouse. The lock Eriko was trying to open didn't belong to that door. I'm just reminded of something, I think it's in the Expanse series. Like it's a human experimentation area, which I think they called the henhouse in that, or something similar to that. It's like some kind of livestock thing. It should have opened effortlessly. At least that's what was supposed to happen. But it didn't open. I noticed beads of sweat forming on Eriko's forehead. She was the one who came up with this idea. Eriko was starting to panic. The rest of us started to panic too. This only opens the henhouse. Let's stop. Let's go back. Shush. You were supposed to be cleaning out the henhouse. They found us back here. I found out why we were here, and why we were trying to open the lock to the back door. Then all four of us were sure to be sentenced to splayed piggy. Don't panic, Eriko. That key opens this lock, right? You already tried it, right? Will you shut up for a minute? This is the right key. It's just hard to open, that's all. She was almost shrieking. Our hearts were pounding loudly. It was as though the sound of our heartbeats was echoing throughout the hallway. At that point, we heard footsteps that didn't belong to a child. Shush! Somebody's coming. The three of us held our breath, but Eriko didn't hear it. She kept fussing with the lock and the key, as if everything would be okay if she could just open the lock. Eriko, somebody's coming. Be quiet. I know this is the right key. I'm not dreaming. I already tried it and it's opened. Come on, why isn't this working? When this lock's open, we can be happy. We can say goodbye to this hell. Eriko, someone is coming. That was loud and caught me off guard. So, what was that all about? My father and mother died. I don't know exactly how old they were. I was too young to remember. They went shopping without me. That must be why they were punished. It was a train accident. What a terrible disaster. A lot of people died in that incident. But maybe my father was one of the lucky ones. He was still alive when he arrived at the hospital, so he was able to share his final words with me. My mother died instantly.
お父さんお父さんお父さんお父さん
I didn't want to admit that this person I could hardly recognize was my father. As I called out to him, I hoped that it was someone else instead. But, unfortunately, it was my father. Maybe I shouldn't have woken him, because when I woke him up, he was reminded of the miserable agony that he had forgotten.
お父さんお父さんお父さんお父さんお父さん
He tried to move his right arm, so he could pat my head. But his arm was wrapped in bandages, and his hand was no longer there. I couldn't find his hand anywhere on the bed. Oof. I only had scary memories of his right hand. His main job was to slap me when I did something bad. But I never wished for it to be gone. Besides, that hand also patted my head, even though that only happened a few times. It was a big, warm hand, and it stroked my head very gently. But no matter what good deeds I did, he could no longer rub my head. No, his hand was the least of his worries. He had to go into emergency surgery. The doctors already warned me that the chance of him surviving was very low. That was why I was allowed to see him, regardless of his condition. Not only could he no longer rub my head, he might be gone forever.
お父さん手術できっと良くなるよねお父さんきっと元気になれるよねなれるよね
よく聞きなさい。お父さんはダメかもしれない。もしもお父さんが死んでも、お前はしっかり生きるんだよ。
嫌だ嫌だお父さんは元気になるよお医者様がちゃんと手術してくれるもんだから死んだりなんかしないんだよ
He was a stubborn and old-fashioned father. He believed endurance was a virtue and never complained about anything. And that was why I couldn't believe he actually said he might not make it. I tried desperately to deny his words, but even that wish wouldn't prolong his life. My father, knowing his time was limited, tried to tell me some important things, but I interrupted his efforts by crying like a baby. I just wanted him to slap me, just like he used to every time I cried like a baby. But he would never slap me again.
よく聞きなさい。お父さんもお母さんも親類というものがいない。
All of her family? Then, but what about the grandpa?
だからお父さんが死んだらお前の世話をしてくれる人は誰もいない。
So he isn't her grandpa? He didn't need to tell me that. My parents used to tell me that all the time, so I was aware of that fact. In other words, my father was the only relative I had left in this entire world. Well, you are related distantly to a lot of people, though.
もしもな、お父さんが死んだら、高野先生を頼りなさい。高野ひふみ先生だよ。言ってみなさい。
高野ひふみ。
そうだ。高野ひふみ先生だよ。
So I'm gonna guess someone he was, in the army with during the war?
高野先生はお父さんの恩師なんだ。
Never mind.
きっとお前を助け。
お父さん、お父さん、お父さん、お父さん。
Considering time scales, she's probably 20 something, at least in the other games, which is in 86. So at least born before midway through the 60s. So parents would have. It's possible that her parents could have been in the war. If I go into the shorter side at each time, though, might have just been they were born during the war or shortly before. Many doctors came into the room in a hurry. He wanted to tell me something else, but the doctor stopped him from talking, so I wasn't able to hear him. I was kicked out of the room. I didn't know what to do. Nobody told me how my father was doing, or when the surgery was going to start. Nobody told me. That was going to be the last conversation I ever had with my father. I think I asked people at the government office about Dr. Takano. They'd asked me if I knew his phone number. I said I didn't. And they didn't ask me anything further. Sometimes they told me they'd look into it, but nothing led to anything. They couldn't find me a guardian, so I ended up going to an orphanage. At the time, there were plenty of orphans from the war, so although there were many orphanages around, they were all full. There were also some orphanages run by civilians. I was sent to one of those civilian orphanages. There was no profit to be had in taking in an orphan in the first place, so I thought those civilians who were running orphanages must have been very good people. So I'm guessing that scene we had at the start of the part was in the orphanage. I was sure they hoped that the children could grow in this loving environment and enter into society with a sense of gratitude. I mean, certainly some orphanages, like run by philanthropists or something, but also on the other hand, there are some which are just bare bones necessities kind of stuff. But reality isn't so kind. How many children in this world can actually express their gratitude towards their parents in the first place? Children are supposed to be nurtured by their parents' love. Therefore, when that environment is destroyed, their hearts are wounded. Every child has her own personality. Receiving affection doesn't guarantee that a child will become someone angelic. Not everyone's heart can be healed. That was why there were some problem kids at the orphanage. Maybe I shouldn't call them problem kids though. The sadness and despair of losing their parents, and the anger of having to hide such feelings filled those kids' hearts. Spending time individually with the children could have solved their problems. But at the orphanage where I was, none of the staff members even tried to spend time with them. or put in an effort to understand them. All they could do was make sure that the kids followed the rules. Therefore, they could only see the children's emotional pleas for help as problems. In this world, nobody expresses love without expecting something in return. The person who founded that orphanage was expecting something in return as well. He wanted the children to appreciate him. That was why such a faint dream was destroyed by cruel reality. The children called the orphanage a prison. Nobody appreciated the staff at all. In fact, all they did was complain. That made the staff slowly realize that love alone couldn't run a facility like that. Dear. So, what was it? I think it's... I forget who wrote it, but in The Prince, if you can only choose between one, it is better to be feared than loved. But if possible, both. Or something along those lines. Just like how the children called it a prison, the staff started to recognize the facility as a prison too. Ooh, also, another thing, a lot of stuff seems to be based on your role within a group. Wait, just going to check that I'm getting the name right first. Yeah, so the Stanford prison experiment, which nowadays have been seen as quite unethical, it showed basically people act to fit their roles. So before the experiment, like, we were recruiting university students at the time in the 60s. What was the majority of that? Basically hippies. And I think they also switched roles, so people who wanted to be the prisoners were made guards, people who signed up to be guards were made prisoners. And so it was all the peace-loving hippies that ended up becoming the cruel guards, because that's kind of a role which guards were expected to fill, and so they filled those boots in effect. I think that was one of the findings of it, at least, or something along those lines. But yeah, so if they're seeing it as a prison, they're going to start acting like it as well. It's kind of a reinforcing cycle. It's a chain reaction resulting from mistrust on both sides. The staff bound the children with rules so they could suppress their problem behaviour. And there was a framed picture of the founder of this orphanage, but I had never seen him in person. Was he satisfied with the fact that he put his own money into this social service? Or maybe he finally realized his dream of being surrounded by angelic children and being celebrated for what he did was simply that, a dream. I don't know. But there's one thing I'm certain of. Such a dream didn't exist at the orphanage. There were so many rules, and several plausible standards outlined for us. But the most valued one was silence. Ooh. So yeah, like I talked about how I think last part, consciousness was linked to the language centers of the brain, which is why like communications, like talking, is really important, especially for children. Like to develop their brain. There's problems if you don't like allow them. So again, I think 60s, maybe earlier, maybe a bit later. More unethical research was done. Yay. But there was stuff like not teaching children language or preventing them from using language. Because it turns out even if you don't teach them a language, they end up inventing their own languages. That's just how ingrained language is into human physiology in a way. But like you get developmental issues if you're prevented from using language because you like these left brain things that show really quite important don't get developed. Anyway, children's chatter tends to increase each other's volume, just like mics drawing closer, and sometimes that leads to fights and the disturbance of order. So children were forbidden from speaking with each other. Completely? Like not just during lessons or something? With those disallowed, they must have thought things would go smoothly. No. However, I think I always heard people's voices at the orphanage. There were two kinds of voices. One was the staff yelling, the other was the children crying. We were not allowed to walk around inside of the orphanage freely, so we never knew who it was that was crying. One time, along with the crying and yelling, we heard the noise of metallic things being smashed against each other. We knew it was some kind of punishment, but there was no way for us to even imagine what it was. We trembled, pretended we didn't hear anything. We kept working on our assignments. One of my roommates told me it was for casket punishment, but she didn't tell me any further, and I didn't want to know either. Even if we behaved exactly the same way as yesterday, if the staff were in a bad mood, they might pick on us. So even if I didn't want to know, I might suddenly find out what the casket punishment is one day. The footsteps of a staff member were getting closer. We noticed them, so we straightened our backs and pretended we were studying hard. It was more important that the staff saw us doing so than us actually getting any work done. I noticed the girl next to me was falling asleep, so I poked her with my elbow. She noticed my signal and straightened her back like the other children. It was almost evening. This was the hardest time for us to keep ourselves awake, and the most dangerous time. Also, presumably because of the bad conditions, they're not necessarily getting all the nutrition they need, which would make it harder for them to stay awake. The door to our room opened, and a mean-looking man showed up. Then, he looked around to make sure none of us were falling asleep. Even if we were actually studying hard, if he thought we were asleep, we were out. That was why we had to make sure we appeared to be studying very hard. Reminds me of something. It's like on the tip of my tongue, I can't quite remember it, but something along the lines of like behavioral stuff. So like the expected result is like work, but so they're expecting that it would entice work. Instead, it like entices the appearance of it instead of actually enticing, and actually reduces people's likelihood to do what they wanted them to. But yeah. The man walked around our desks. I hoped he would just walk by me. That was what we all prayed, as we kept working on our homework. The more we pretended to study hard, the more we could hear the sound of metal objects. The sound of metal objects crashing into each other, along with screams. We couldn't even imagine what the poor subject of that punishment was going through. Maybe it was something even worse than the casket punishment. To erase such fears, we tried to concentrate even harder on our work. We kept working, as the metal sounds and the screams went on forever. So yeah, you might be surprised to learn, but people respond better to positive reinforcement than to negative reinforcement. In terms of learning, at least. The only time we were allowed to exchange words with our roommates was right after turning the lights off to go to bed. Being located in the middle of the mountains, the orphanage was very quiet at night. After making sure the staff members were far enough from our room, we enjoyed talking amongst ourselves. That was the only leisure time allowed to us. But it wasn't anything nice like enjoying pleasant conversation. Leisure time's also important for developing. Why? Because we mostly talked about others behind their backs. We spoke of things like, that member of staff is only strict or unfair or malicious towards this person, and so on. We just repeated those topics forever, till someone couldn't keep themselves awake anymore. We even discussed how we could get back at the staff. We took revenge on all of them in our imagination. Some kids even started to cry when talking about it, difficult as it was for us. If the subjects we spoke of were negative, talking about them was the only way to vent our frustration. Even though we felt despair about tomorrow, we were able to fall asleep. But sometimes, a different subject popped up. It was about the Gaoka House of Love and Mercy on the other side of the river. I'm guessing that's another orphanage. Yeah. Over there, I hear, we not only get nap time, but snack time too. Plus, the president is a very nice person. The House of Love and Mercy was a privately run orphanage, just like the one I was at. Let me guess, they're planning to escape and try to get into that orphanage. But it was a very kind facility, unlike ours. It seemed like a fantasy land compared to our current environment. And let me guess, it isn't the rumours which they make it out to be, either. A few years before, this place was a lot worse. A few children tried to escape. It's hard to believe. There was a time when this orphanage was even worse to live at. Supposedly, 3 or 4 people tried to escape. We don't know the exact number though. They headed to the House of Love and Mercy. Their escape was a success. Except for one unlucky child, they were able to get to the property of the House of Love and Mercy. I guess the staff couldn't follow them into other orphanages' property. In other words, the other facility's property had to be out of their jurisdiction. The staff were frustrated that kids got away from them. They dragged the one they caught back here. Sure, they wanted to bring back the others who got away from them too. Certain the staff were determined not to let a single one escape. It was easy to see that determination in the obstinate way they locked the place up after the event. But they were never able to bring back the ones that got away. No matter how much the staff were mortified, they couldn't reclaim the children and punish them. In other words, if you could make it to the House of Love and Mercy, then you could escape the evil clutches of this hell. On the other hand, the one they caught went through such misery afterwards. Yet the exact details of how he was punished were never passed down. All that remained were the ominous phrases left by those who knew him at the time. The drowned ducky, the mashed caterpillar, the splayed piggy. I can't even imagine what kind of punishments they were. The only thing I can say is that those punishments were supposed to be far more harsh than the casket punishment, which was the most cruel punishment I knew at the time. I can only imagine how horrible those punishments were from their ominous names. After that, the captured kid's wish came true. He was able to leave the orphanage. Was he able to leave this orphanage safely and enjoy his freedom while breathing in fresh air under the blue sky? So 80% chance I'm going to say that he died. Well, according to the rumours, that wasn't what happened at all. While he was playing in the boiler room, he slipped and fell, injured his brain and died. Not how I expected it, but okay. And why was he playing in the boiler room? The children were instructed not to go into the boiler room after that incident. Everyone knew the boiler room was always locked. So everyone knew he was killed. And not just that, he was killed after being tortured. Okay, yeah. I mean, I get a feeling not so much killed, but died as a result of the torture. He was killed to teach the other children that they would face hell on earth if they tried to escape. Yet those who faced that risk and made it out obtained ordinary, average lives, full of love and mercy namesake, which were far better conditions than we lived in here. Maybe the House of Love and Mercy was really heaven. Maybe all the orphanages are pretty much the same. But compared to my orphanage, I bet anything else would have been better. Even if someone escaped successfully, the police would catch him, and he'd be sent back to the orphanage, which would be pretty much the same as being killed. However, if he could reach the House of Love and Mercy, they'd take him in. They wouldn't send him back. By talking about us escaping to the House of Love and Mercy, we were trying to forget how cruel reality was to us. Oh, and I've gone quite a bit over time. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know any feedback you have in the comments. And until next time, see ya. Wait. Come on, OBS. There we are.